Hello everyone, my name is Joshua, and I will be doing a series of presentations, interviews, and some other attempts at making videos that will be interesting. Some of them will be controversial topics, and others will be more whimsical. But the hope is that no matter what I cover, it will be something that can be entertaining and also informative. Now, in terms of entertaining and what I'm going over and whimsical, the first topic that I'm going to be covering in my series is actually very serious. I'm going to be covering the Israel-Palestine conflict. And there's no doubt that recent news has made this a major topic in a way that I personally have not seen in my lifetime. There are many factors to go over, and in this video, I'm actually not going to cover much of that topic at the moment. What we do know is that there was the tragic and terrible attacks that happened on October 7th into Israel by Hamas from Gaza, and then the subsequent carpet bombing and cutting off of water and electricity and other supplies to Gaza. As it stands in this interview, going from the start of October 7th, 2023 to today, which is November the 13th, 2023, Israel officially claims that 1,200 Israelis were killed under the attack by Hamas, with their hostages as well that were taken. And for Gaza, over 10,000 people dead and close to 5,000 children and counting. And actually, as of this moment, it's hard for any counts to happen because the hospitals are now being shut down. It's a very horrific time because probably since the Vietnam War, Americans have not been able to go home, turn on a mainstream news station, and watch a war happen in real time, live on TV. Al Jazeera, for example, the news media station that comes out of Qatar, has often shown more live and graphic scenes of war over the last several decades. But this is the first time we're really seeing it on the mainstream. I'm not going to cover why I think it is happening now at this current time in this discussion, but that is what is leading this to so many people to feel like they cannot get this conflict off their minds because it's being shown every day. And for those who are more pro-Israel and those who are pro-Palestinian, this is also becoming a very serious cultural war and dividing a lot of people in this country and abroad. So for this video, what I'm going to do as a start, because I'm going to make several of these videos, I'm going to actually discuss why I care. Now, of course, anybody that's a caring human is going to care about what happened to Israelis on October 7th. You're going to care about what's happening to Palestinians right now. And, you know, that's all it takes for one to actually care about a topic. But I have been invested in the topic of Palestinian rights specifically, and the case for justice for Palestinians for about 2 decades now. And I think it's important to tell this story, to actually put my own opinions and why I have spent so much time on this into context, because I'm not Jewish, I'm not Palestinian. In my friend groups and the people I know, I never counted how many friends that I have that are Jewish versus friends that are Arab. But basically, I feel like it's been over the years quite a lot from both sides. But I'm not invested into this discussion and this topic and this history because of people I've known necessarily in that way, having an emotional attachment and something in my background. That's the point I'm trying to say. But it does start with my religious upbringing that actually would get me to be inclined to want to learn more about this topic. I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and the Jehovah's Witness religion is a branch of Christianity that is not mainstream and is not accepted by the majority of mainstream Christians. Jehovah's Witnesses call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses because they claim God's name, who they say is Jehovah, is so holy that it must be said. And there's a strong emphasis on the holiness of God's name. I learned early on that in Judaism, God's name is also viewed as that holy, but it's so holy that you can't pronounce it. You should not try to pronounce it. So the same kind of passion about the name, but the exact opposite approach to how to handle it. Jehovah's Witnesses also do not believe Jesus Christ is God incarnate. They claim that he's just God's son, he's the Messiah. Now, Jews don't believe that either, but in Deuteronomy 6:4 in the Torah, where it says, the Shema, that says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Jehovah's Witnesses believe in that very strictly, the strict monotheism of Jews, except that they actually use the word Jehovah in Deuteronomy 6:4 instead of saying Lord. But another factor that was also a part of this upbringing is Jehovah's Witnesses are pacifists and not involved in politics. They have a strict stand of neutrality. And because of that, anytime that there's heightened political problems, Jehovah's Witnesses get targeted by governments. And one of the governments that I grew up learning about that targeted Jehovah's Witnesses was the Nazis during prior to World War II, basically with the rise of Hitler and into World War II, because Jehovah's Witnesses would not even ever say Heil Hitler. They would not participate in any of the political events that the Nazis had, and this made them targets, not because of who they were, like Jews and Roma people. Roma people are otherwise often known as gypsies, but those people were being targeted because of their genetics, or that's the understanding of where the Nazis thought of it, that it was something that they couldn't fix. For the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's understood that they could have got out of this problem by simply denouncing their religion, and they didn't. So they had purple triangles in the concentration camps in Germany. Of course, Jews had the yellow star. So I was very well aware of the Holocaust and the idea of hatred towards minorities, and the things that caused a lot of suffering to the Jewish people was something that I grew up on as a Jehovah's Witness. And I was always learning that that was something that, of course, was horrifying and evil and wrong in the world. Now, as a teenager, when I got extra religious, I really started to see the entire, in my very naive view of the world, that because the Bible was written in the Middle East, everything about the Middle East had to be studied. I looked at the entire Middle Eastern world as a lens into biblical, the biblical stories. Sometimes almost I would go as far as to say the mind of God. That because this is God's word, it's telling stories from this part of the world. So I was interested in everything about the Middle East. So I was studying Hebrew on my own. I had Leo Rosten's Joys of Yiddish, which I thought was very interesting. And of course, Yiddish is actually not a Middle Eastern language necessarily, but I guess you could debate that. But then I started studying Arabic, and I saw this all as a part of this package of understanding the biblical world. So I joined a Jehovah's Witness group, because the other thing about Jehovah's Witnesses is that they're evangelical. They try to convert people into the religion, and many know Jehovah's Witnesses is always standing on a corner somewhere, going to the door, to your door, and trying to give you magazines, right, and convert you. So Jehovah's Witnesses reach out to different language groups. There was an Arabic-speaking Jehovah's Witness group in the Bay Area. I went there to try to help convert Arabs in the Bay Area to being Jehovah's Witness. It's a very interesting time of my life, and there's a lot of stories that I could tell that are completely not relevant to this topic right now. But there's no doubt that many people living in the United States with Arabic names were terrified or completely thrown off guard or annoyed, upset even, that I was coming to their door with somebody else randomly, because in the Yellow Pages we found that they had an Arabic last name, and so I had the Burj Al Murakabi, the Watchtower, and the Istiqaz, and the Wake magazine. At this time I had no understanding of politics. That's the other thing. So because I was trying to learn Hebrew and I was trying to learn Arabic, when I met a Palestinian that was from, let's say, Jerusalem, or another part of what is now Israel, I would say, "Oh my gosh, you're from Jerusalem? Do you speak Hebrew as well?" And not realizing that this was very insulting. I didn't realize this was a very controversial topic, that the reason why they were learning Hebrew was not a choice that they necessarily appreciated. It was something that was a byproduct of the politics that was controversial. So I completely was unaware and insensitive to anything like that. And so, needless to say, despite the fact that I had some success, a lot of people that I talked to found me to be just obnoxious, and I could tell it was not I don't have a lot of success stories of that time period of my life for winning over a lot of folks. But believe it or not, I did have some Bible studies that were attained through this method. Now, I ended up stop being a Jehovah's Witness, which is another story in of itself. But after being a Jehovah's Witness, I still held on to the interests that I always have had about the Middle East and the people and the religions. And keep in mind that I come from a working class background, and I didn't have the money to travel the way I wanted to. If I could have, I would have traveled very early on to go more direct, to get involved and see how everybody's living and learn that way. But that wasn't something that was attainable to me at the time. So I started going to the synagogue with friends. I had Jewish friends. They invited me, and I enjoyed the service. I had Muslim friends. I got invited to go to the mosque, and I went to the mosque, and I was interested in that. And for me, I saw the Israel-Palestine conflict as something that I thought went back to biblical days. That was not necessarily something that would be resolved. Well, I just kind of saw it as almost this thing that was just as almost like meant to be. Of course, there's some scuffles between Israel and the Arab world, Islam and Judaism, and I never really understood the proportion of it. It just was something that I just kind of saw as this thing that was before and probably will always be. And then, as I was moving on in life to various things, I met activists. I started getting involved in political activism. And I met a Jewish man that grew up in the South who invited me to go to protests, and he started becoming a sort of mentor to me. And at the height of the time that I was actually learning more about Judaism and even having a Shabbat at someone's home, this mentor of mine drops this idea that Israel is an oppressive state towards Palestinians, that there is a lot of problems about the way Israel treats minorities within Israel, and even more about what happens in occupied territories. This was all language that I wasn't even familiar with, okay? And I think, to be honest, I found it a little bit shocking and jarring. And I decided that I was going to do a lot more research on my own. He then took me to do a presentation from a woman from the Bay Area that was a friend of his, also a Jewish American woman. Her name is Barbara Lubin, and she was one of the co-founders, or actually the founder, of Middle Eastern Children's Alliance. She gave a presentation on her journey. Why does she care? And how she grew up being very pro-Palestinian. And she was involved in she grew up being very pro-Israel, involved in other leftist activities, but very skeptical of those who were skeptical of Israel. And then she gave a story to what she saw in Israel and in Palestine, and why she changed to being a critic, and why she felt not only did she switch sides, but to be very active in campaigns, like in giving speeches to critique Israel. And it was a very convincing speech, but I still feel like I had a lot to learn. But as I delved into it, it started to become a part of my activist life. One of the first things that I was protesting and what I got involved in was something at first dealing with Iraq. Now, keep this in mind, this is before 9/11. Since the Gulf War, there were sanctions on Iraq that the UN was saying was killing the children, and that there were those who were a part of the oil for food program in the UN that were quitting their jobs because they felt that it was a human rights atrocity that was targeting the civilian population of Iraq. That was, and because that was happening, and because the U.S. government was the one, this was under Clinton, putting this kind of activity of these sanctions that was hurting the civilian population of Iraq, I made a position to go out on my weekends with cards and to try to bring awareness to stop the U.S. sanctions on Iraq and the bombing, because we were bombing Iraq since I was in high school. This is all the way up to 9/11, by the way. And of course, I hope everybody knows that nobody that did the 9/11 attacks were from Iraq as well. But so this was something I got involved in, and it was very unpopular with a lot of the public in my hometown, but I took that position. And from there, I also started taking position for the rights of Palestinians and to end the occupation and the treatment of Palestinians by Israel. I also protested the bombing of Afghanistan at the start of that campaign. I understood why many Americans felt that there had to be a response. 9/11 did happen. I made that position with several others in Modesto, and there was quite a bit of hostile reaction as well from the public. But that's a position that I took. And I also protested Bush's invasion of Iraq. I'm not a pacifist. I'm just very picky about war and conflicts and what it means to civilian populations. That is not the topic that I'm going to delve into right now. But I simply want to put my interest in the Israel-Palestine conflict also in context to my other interests that deal with mainly U.S. involvement in conflicts that I disagree with. Okay? So, and this leads me to another point to say. So after this, I started, when I was in college, I started making, this subject became a part of my research. And one thing that I started realizing, that I have many friends that we can talk about a lot of things that we agree or disagree on that don't get controversial. So, for example, I can say, hey, did you know that Saudi Arabia is a Sunni Muslim supremacist state? It discriminates against Shiites. It doesn't allow for Jews or Christians or any other religions to have any rights there, and it's very oppressive to women's rights. That's not controversial. In fact, most Arabs would agree with me on that. If I say, oh, Lebanon, their democracy, which was set up by the French around the same time that Israel came into existence, it's based on identity politics. A politician has to represent being Christian or Muslim, And I wanted to critique the identity politics that's been embedded in Lebanese politics and talk about alternatives that would be better, or to at least kind of discuss that as a problem to maybe some of the things that have helped create civil strife within Lebanon. That's not controversial. I could talk about the situation of the Kurds, for the most part, unless there's a Turkish nationalist around, not controversial. But when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, I have many friends where we agree on so many other things, and this one becomes a huge bone of contention that becomes very difficult even for friendships to be maintained. There's a lot of strong views, and that has been frustrating, to say the least. That how is it that so many of us that see eye to eye on so many other things, but on this one, it doesn't. It's difficult. Well, hopefully we can get a chance to go over that a little bit more. But that's just something that I saw that's been in my personal experience. Now, I do want to say also though that the majority of scholars that I read starting off that covered this conflict and the human rights abuses happening to Palestinians have almost all come from Israeli historians, Israeli human rights groups, and Jews. And then later I read also more Palestinian. I got more exposed to the Palestinian perspective. So I don't see this as a Jewish versus Arab conflict. I see it as a little bit more complex than that there is a world of that Israel has an ideology, it has a set of objectives, it has unresolved objectives, such as it has no defined borders. What Israel is not clear, or what it's supposed to be or end up as. The same for Palestine at this point. There's no Palestinian country. You have occupied territories left over. And I will go over a little bit more of that in some other videos in that topic. So ultimately, what I want to make clear is that I'm going to bring out research that I have delved into that I think does not get brought up enough in these discussions. That I have watched many debates on the topic, and I'm seeing a lot of debates now. I see people talking about a lot of things that, what is Zionism and what did the Zionists say? What is this ideology? What is the presupposition of the state? A lot of people talk about Hamas, and you can talk about the charter of Hamas. But a lot of people don't know about Shas, which is an Israeli Jewish religious party, or Jewish Strength, and some of the other parties' platforms, such as even Likud that Netanyahu represents, and what relevance that would have or not in the conflict. So I will be covering a wide range of these. I'm hoping that this is informative and reaches out to people of like minds who are good faith actors, that maybe we don't see the situation in the same way, but we have the same morals and ethics. And I am trying to persuade people to see this in a different way. I'm putting that out there. That's what I'm going to try to do. And so the next set of videos, that's what I'm going to be producing. I hope that it is. I plan on this being as watertight as possible in terms of the information I have. A lot of this, I will try to make them shorter than even this video, so that it's not going to take too long to go over some of these points. For me, for one, I hope there's a ceasefire, and I want to see peace brought to everybody. And right now, I don't have a peace plan solution, but what's happening right now is not working for anyone. And so that is my ultimate hopes. Again, I'm not claiming to have the ones answer to that, but I don't want anybody driven into the sea. I don't want to see anybody getting a genocide put on them. And that is just where my heart and soul is towards this right now. And so I want to make that very clear. But I do believe in condemning certain actions, ideas, and behavior that I think are well documented, and I'm going to make my position on those very clear. So, having said that, I will end this here, and may there be some respite in this world on all the people who are suffering of all wars going on right now, and battles that humans should not be doing to each other.